here's the and I'm definitely put this list up here. All this really encompassed the Gilded Age, all up here. All these things that you need to know around 1865-ish to about 1898 or 1900 is happening around this. I'm going to be saying a lot of dates today, but you don't have to know those dates. I keep emphasizing this. Please look at like all the things that this kind of the subset of the Gilded Age. Really from yesterday, Reconstruction, Manifest Destiny 2.0 or Part 2 here that on there. The Republicans kind of dominate during this time, with the exception of Grover Cleveland, who acts like a Republican really in his policies for the most part. Really pro-business, laissez-faire kind of economic policies in here, enriching somewhat themselves and their supporters, but you have really Republican domination, and mostly in Congress too as well. So with the exceptions like 1874, 1890, you don't need to know all that. Scandals, corruption out west with companies, and definitely in the cities for sure. It's the second industrial revolution. We know we had the first in the early 19th century with the marketplace revolution, with the 4 or 5 C's: cotton, customers, canals, communication, all those kind of things here that as far as like the second industrial revolution is going to be more I'll talk about the Rose mnemonic device. So this is the second industrial revolution, really more lifting us into modernity, like trying to be kind of precursor to the 20th century here. Gets us into the leading industrial country in the world, or on par with Great Britain, which is really amazing. Captains of industries versus robber barons, labor unions, populism, bimetallism debate, new immigration, urbanization. And this is kind of, I want you to don't forget about this late 19th century. You got the precursor to the progressive movement, and reforms keep on going. Civil rights are being worked on for African Americans. A lot of people protesting against the lynching, the segregation laws that's going to become prevalent in the 1890s. So you see a lot of this. All right, temperance for sure, voting rights for women. Now they really want to concentrate, two women's groups want to concentrate on getting kind of the voting rights for the most part in here. So besides to continue on property rights and equal opportunities for women, but it does not just get started backed up into the early 20th century here. And finally, imperialism in the West and overseas. You don't see a story talking about imperialism in the West, but we know Indians are being really colonized and dispossessed during this time. So it's really American imperialism. Once they get kind of like the Indian Wars kind of come to a close in a way, that you get this kind of look overseas. Good. But I'm telling you, this beginning here is so important that you just take a deep breath and says, it's a lot, but certain things. Can you put them in a time period? Again, can you categorize certain events into a certain time period, or especially they give you a range and you, for the most part, stay in that range? Right? Now, in emphasizing here, know why they call it a Gilded Age, all right? Why they use Twain's term? Why do historians put this stamp on here to the Gilded Age? It's so important that you start here. Why is it called a Gilded Age? Well, because on the surface, looks great, we're prospering, we're becoming a leading economic industrial power in here. Population is growing, we're expanding, but what's underneath? Social inequality, some unhealthy living conditions, some unsafe working conditions. So it may not be good for everybody here. And you always will see this anytime, any country, just besides our own, that when we're prospering, well, what's going on and how you know about capitalism, psychocapitalism, it will end. You will get, a couple of, depressions in here, 1873, 1893. It mirrors the 1920s. You see the roaring 20s, but maybe you could put a question mark beside that roaring for whom. I know your test on May 15 does not deal with the 1950s, 1980s, but a lot of people see, again, these kind of, exponential growth in certain areas into our economies that's booming and advancing. And people are moving into the middle class. There is more leisure time. There's more consumer products. More people are, have more opportunities during these times. But there's still this kind of some people are not, we're not all rising, and what's the undercurrent here, and why are economy comes crashing, why aren't we more prepared and learn from our past mistakes. So that definitely is so cool. All right, and again, hopefully that me going on and on and on, I feel like that's a Journey song there, like Don't Stop Believing, but that I'll try to make it as short as sweet as possible. So this is 1865, what they call to 1898. You can mess around with these years as everything. And we're going to be doing part one. It's usually 13% of your test. Again, I can't emphasize the 19th century is probably going to be your meat and potatoes in preparation for the May 15th test. I think College Board is very much going to be apprehensive about, well, where did students end up at? And, so I don't know. There's going to be different DBQs for different people. So it's not going to be all one and the same. But I just have a feeling that they may do something on progressive, but they just had that, I think last year, a couple of years ago, a DBQ. They're going to be very apprehensive about the 20th century. And we're going to go over that, but be apprehensive up until that time, like 1900 to 1945. Okay, great. All right, for this time period, go West, young man. That's Horace Greeley. He kind of been attributed with that phrase. He may not be the originator, so that's where we're going to start at. There's opportunities in land, mining, and farming and herding. So you see, that's what's going to just bring people out to Spain. There is just massive amount of land. You got the, AP history makes me nauseous. You got the Homestead Act. That brings people out, and plus the cities are getting crowded. And if new immigrants are coming in, if you are part of that, fortunate group, like maybe you're coming from Sweden, maybe you're coming in from Germany, and that you can just move on, or from Ireland, you can move on to the West and you have a little bit of coin on you, then that is the time to do that. It's going to be, seems to be endless opportunities out there. Even though some, as you guys know, the reality is a lot of harsh, working conditions out there about the farming and herding, but it does create opportunities. West is going to reflect the politics of the cities here. You get the greed, you get the corruption, you get some of the irresponsible behavior by the U.S. government, by local governments, and by the people themselves, as of our relationships with the Native Americans, our relationships with your neighbor, as far as like a land grabs and, buying up land and, and taking advantage of people who are in certain conditions. And, just really being somewhat, not the best people, best behavior that was going out here west. All right. What we definitely have to know, this is always getting to the heart of the video here in a way, but I told you, you better know what's happening during the Gilead. The Hot List, Manifest Destiny 2.0 Part 2. And did the picture up here of the, progress, American progress. This painting been, since first grade, the allegory to Manifest Destiny. You're like, but Mr. Price, when did this kind of concept of Manifest Destiny? Well, John L. Sullivan actually coined that term before the Gilded Age. So you think about, Texas, the expansion, the Mexican-American War. Think about the 1840s. So this painting, you should always look at the date, it's 1872, but it's used almost for all of Manifest Destiny in the mid-19th century to the late 19th century. And again, you should know the details about that, you know, her telegraph wire, giant naked lady, the light into the darkness of the west. You see the railroads there, so you know this painting, you know, by heart. So Transcontinental Railroads complete in 1869. We'll talk a little bit more about that, getting into like thinking about progress, but also underneath the corruption here. I guess that's the theme, that like things that are, you know, pretty positive, but things that are, you know, pretty bad underneath here as we take a closer examination here. Nothing too positive about the Plains Wars. You don't really need to know Sand Creek Massacre, you know, the 1864 Fetterman Massacre, 1866. On here, the Red River Wars, 1874, 1875, I believe, you know, like this going on around in the Texas area here, and kind of like the Chief Joseph like retreating, you know, 1877, captured by Oliver O. Howard. It's more these kind of the Wounded Knee in 1890 and the Little Big Horn in 1876. And the reason why I choose that is because it's a 76 year, so knowing if you want to, you know, remember example, and that seems like a win for the Lakota Indians. Know some Plains Indians from the Cheyenne, Lakota. I think that would be good. Closing the West. Well, the kind of end of the Plains Wars, like, you know, again with the just a really, you know, again another senseless massacre there, and you know, again you think about the Pequot Wars. You know, 1637, you think about this one was pretty, you know, Sand Creek 1864 was bad, but it really symbolized that the Indians have been decimated and a lot of them wiped out. I know we don't want to talk about, again, failures in American history, Reconstruction, definitely the Plains Indian War. People just, Mr. President, I don't feel sad and look bad. I don't know if you'll get a lot on this at all, you know. Century Dishonor, like, you know, comes out. You get the kind of like trying to, the Dawes Act of 1887, which was trying to assimilate Native American Indians, Carlisle Indian School. So you get this kind of like, you know, trying to assimilate the Indians to be farmers, allotments of land, take them off the reservations. You're not going, I don't, it's just going to be good that maybe you had frosting on the cake to you now. I can't see a DBQ on really the West and the Native Americans and just concentrating on them. It's just going to be good context, as I said before, during this time period. Now, what you will get, or what you should use, probably the most important thing here, is Frederick Jackson Turner, you know, the frontier thesis, the Turner thesis, that the frontier is closing, and that has made Americans before, made, like, you know, the rugged individualism, the freedom, defined America that was, you know, definitely not Britain or France, kind of the old world. So once that has closed, as he's talking about it in 1893 in this Columbian kind of World's Fair, kind of like in Chicago exposition here, that he's saying that we're going to have to go beyond our borders, hence foreshadows part of the Gilded Age, the American imperialism or American kind of expansion beyond our borders here and getting involved in the Spanish-American War. That's very important. That so probably of all things here, I didn't, you know, put it probably an answer, but just frontier thesis, Turner thesis, that you definitely recognize that immediately. Closing the frontier in here is always referred to by a lot of historians. Good. All right. Now, the Rose mnemonic devices, railroads, oil, steel, and electricity. Electricity more at the end of the 19th century and really more prevalent in the 1920s in a way. But it's a good mnemonic device to know about the Second Industrial Revolution to kind of get you springboarded off. But the main thing here, if you're talking about canals and the market revolution, first thing, it is railroads. Now I say railroads, okay, in here. It will cause really the depressions in here in 1873, 1893. One of the major causes in here if they fail. It is the advancements and expansion in the West. It is the kind of connecting and kind of like, finishing up our manifest destiny, kind of connecting California or the West Coast to the East Coast. But it's also a bad underbelly too as well, representing all this kind of, corruption that's going on here. Really the kind of the land grabs I've got up here, the, unsafe working conditions that you got the immigrants from the East as well as the immigrants from the West, Asian Americans, particularly Chinese, working on the railroads in these just deplorable working conditions and deplorable kind of work hours in a way to kind of meet their goals and to keep advancing, so enriching the people that are the kind of the stockholders in the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific Railroad companies here. And just really railroads just being unsafe, hazardous, and the farmers get this, so you don't even get really air brakes until after 1869, Westinghouse. Causing a lot of, just really there's a lot of calamity, with just, with railroads and stuff. And not thinking too much about safety at this time. The railroad rates that are just in rebates that are given to the rich and powerful business owners or people who have the money and and other people not. A lot of this stuff is not going to be solved really until the late 19th century, early 20th century, or even addressed in a way here. So this is, and probably the biggest representation of this that, of all the Grant scandals, you don't have to know the Whiskey Ring, Gold Ring, Corner, and all that Belknap scandal and all that, is the Credit Mobilier scandal here. So the kind of sham construction company that's created by the railroad companies on the Transcontinental Railroad, that you really would get these, again, investment into this stocks in here by this company that they own, that will reap the benefits. They are kind of the board of directors of Credit Mobilier, but they're getting the money and the kind of the permission and the tracts of land from the U.S. government, from congressmen, from Vice President Schuyler Colfax, who owns stock in the company. It is a conflict of interest. Mr. Bryce, I understand the Credit Mobilier scandal, even what you just said. Well, you can't just create a company and you want the value of the stock to go up. So how do you create the value of the stock to go up and that you own this stock? Well, by infusing government tax dollars, not taxes from personal income tax, but tariffs and the sales of land into the stock, enriching yourselves in that. So it is a conflict of interest. You cannot do that. You're gaming the system here with the Credit Mobilier scandal. Already the railroad companies are receiving really they even doubled the amount of land they were granted here, acres of land here, over 64,000 acres of land that they're supposed to resell to settlers here. They're granted to the railroad companies for each mile of track. So they really got their hands in this big money government trough. And it's becoming this embezzlement grafting scheme that, that really, makes them inefficient, makes them really, have this railroad line that's going to snake through certain areas of land that they're buying, investing in. Really is going to make the Transcontinental Railroad really unusable in 2 or 3 years, and many the tracks of the Transcontinental Railroad are going to have to be rebuilt. So it's not this kind of just this glorious thing when they made a proprietary point that there are some things here that really is making this, that's going to shed the light. Along with the newspaper scandal around this time of the Credit Mobilier scandal that people have shown the light of here. By the way, Grant did not have any stock in Credit Mobilier or anything about that. So it really is a scandal that starts in the early 1860s. Before Grant is president, but I know people always like to historians say Grant, oh yeah, all the scandals, and he's never really like head of any scandal himself. Trusting people too much. That's kind of like his loyalty from probably it as being a soldier and a general in the Union Army. Anyway, so you get this kind of at this time here, if you want to think about, and you're already probably thinking about, well, what's happening in the cities. Boss Tweed, Thomas Nast, all the political cartoons that we've been over and over, the political machines, the, you know, again, the grafting of government money to use on a, like, you know, construction of a courthouse that should have been, you know, should not be $12 million like that, you know, and the Tweed ring, Boss Tweed's paying his own people. All the words that you do not really have to know, but you know one word that you do have to know. It's all about patronage and your supporters. So you get the cronyism, hooking up your friends. You get the nepotism, family that's like hooked up in like, you know, certain positions or supervisor positions in here. And it's all goes to this patronage spoil system in here that's pretty corrupt and representative of this time. That's kind of exposed to as well. And I think and I've told this before, if you want to think about this time, this is what a lot of countries around the world are experiencing, their Gilded Age, where money is coming in, but who is reaping the benefits? And if your country is not at this time where you're giving like a lot of health benefits, a lot of retirement benefits, then you have a hand into this money trough, and it makes you kind of have the temptation to become corrupt and produce these corrupt systems in here. And again, this is the time of money, and money being in capital being around. Well, who's enriching themselves? It's the temptation of that. And we get a chance for correction, and the correction is kind of like, you know, some of the legislation, Supreme Court decisions. You don't have to really know these. If you get a document, you'll probably get a decision in Munn v. Illinois, 1876, really 1877. But I like to use that because Wabash in 1886 versus Illinois says that, you know, that states can't regulate the railroad industry. Munn was pretty favorable kind of a decision for the states and the regulation of railroads. Wabash kind of counteracts that. The Interstate Commerce Act in 1887, which creates the Interstate Commerce Commission, on paper looks good. You gotta set regular rates that's consistent. You can't provide these rebates. You gotta do all these things. The Interstate Commerce Commission is trying to correct all the abuses. Really no enforcement. As what we say here, a lot of these acts, like the Pendleton Civil Service Act, 1883, sets the stage for that you will get the government offices instead of the spoil system of patronage by merit. You know, it goes back to that, you know, Confucius idea of the civil service system. The best people get these government positions in here, the ones that are qualified. But really, most of this, along with we'll talk about tomorrow, the Sherman Antitrust Act 1890, pretty much to use the word anemic. You know, when you you have like a low red blood cell count that you can't really, you know, have any energy or any strength to really enforce this. This is part of the Gilded Age that will produce the Progressive Era to try to put some teeth and into some of the enforcement power, into some of this legislation that was already passed, and maybe even pass additional legislation in here. All right. So, and that's good. I think that's more than enough for right now, because again, tomorrow I'll talk about the characteristics of the second industrial revolution. You know, talk about the men who built America, and you know, what were they, robber barons or captains of industry here, and talk about again the effects upon that and the kind of labor response to that, and maybe we can kind of finish, not tomorrow, but Thursday. Because I'll do 3 a week and kind of like, work on your grades. And, I got to meet with the other teachers tomorrow. That we will definitely like look at that and see how much I can get into the response here. I think in a way, and kind of populism and all that movement was a response along with the labor unions. Maybe if a little bit long, but that would be kind of good to kind of finish that up on Thursday. And again, most of this, try to get it together, bring it all in, look at all my annotations, take notes, whatever it may be, handwritten type. You don't have to watch my face. You can just listen to things here, or, stop it and just take down what you need to know as you're going on and learn for yourself. That's the best way. Guys and ladies like that. So have a good day, and, keep a schedule up. Hopefully, again, you're taking time for your work.